Hey guys, welcome back to Ink. Today I have in conversation with me a good friend of mine called Neil Harvey. I've known Neil for around 10 years, and when I first met him, he had just gotten out of prison. While in prison, he had this radical life change and he was just embarking on a brand new life after lockdown. Today in our conversation, we look at how we can get the best out of our season of imprisonment during lockdown. And we look at some best practices for life after lockdown. Check out the conversation, like, share, and subscribe.
All right, how's it going? Welcome to today's episode from Ink. We've all had one of those days where you feel like you don't matter, everything's going wrong, and no one is there to listen or relate. But here at Ink, you do matter, and here we can relate. Because for all of us, there's always a something, a one thing, or many things that can really affect the way we think and feel. We hope that today's conversation brings a little bit of hope to your day. And do make sure to stay connected by subscribing to the channel.
All right, well, hey, Neil Harvey, how's it going, mate?
I'm doing well, mate. It's good to see you.
Yeah, we were just saying it's been about 8 years, right?
It must be about 8 years.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm almost 30 now, so it's been quite a while since we last saw each other, but you guys doing well?
It's good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, likewise. So for those who obviously don't know, Neil was actually one of my youth pastors when I was a kid growing up. But you have quite the story. You've been on quite the journey, particularly in your kind of adolescent life. So why don't we just get started today by sharing that journey? I was telling Neil off the record that it was probably the first ever book that I read was his book, which is bad because that was after I did a degree in English and I never read a book for that degree. So tell us a bit about your journey and kind of what's in that book of yours.
Yeah, well, by the way, Nathan, great to be invited onto this platform. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely,
good to see you, man. Yeah, Nathan's referring to a book, of course, that I wrote a number of years ago. Spent a little bit of time in prison, actually, when I was back in my younger days. Well, I say younger days, I was actually 28. So it's probably not that young. But yeah, got into a ton of trouble when I was younger, got into drugs, it's a story that many people are familiar with. I got into drugs when I was about 14 and which developed, of course, into a bad habit and then addiction. But I masked it quite a lot because, I ended up becoming part of a group of guys back in South Wales where we were doing quite a bit of drug dealing, which is terrible stuff, of course. But that's what it was like back in those days for me. And then ended up in prison when I was 28, after a long stint of, crime and drug dealing and that sort of stuff. And ended up in prison when I was 28. And when I was in prison, I had a great experience with God, which, is just like one of those moments that people talk about where they, saw the light or whatever language people use. But I really had a moment. I really had a transformational moment where I felt God speak to me and I felt like God was real. And it's like my eyes were open to another reality, it was bizarre. And kind of pursued that. And I started going to church when I got out of prison. And cut a long story short, I became a pastor. So I'm actually a pastor now. Been a pastor for the last 15 years, actually. So doing a ton of stuff for the communities and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah. Mate, it's funny because the stories of your past, I remember growing up, you hear stories like it being bounced around school, like, oh, I've heard about this person, that person. And it's crazy to think that you went from that past to this crazy transformation in lockdown in prison to now life after lockdown and life after prison. And that's kind of what I want to touch on today, because I feel like so many of us right now, we may not have been to prison, but we can empathize with what it's like being locked down for a period of time.
Yeah.
How did that affect, like, if you recount on some memories from being in prison in lockdown, what was that like? How did it destroy you? Did it break you down? What did it feel like being in lockdown?
Do you know what, Nate? It's really interesting because when I went into lockdown, you know, like everyone else, few months ago, I actually remember saying to my wife and saying to some guys that I work with, man, it's like being back in prison. Because there's actually quite a lot of parallels in a sense, you know. One of the things that happens when you go into prison is that, you know, you feel like you've lost purpose to start with. And I think that's one of the hardest things about, you know, about being in prison. You feel like you have no purpose. Yeah. And we all feel like we want purpose. So what happens in prison is that routine becomes your best friend, just to keep you a little bit sane, you know, and stable.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same in lockdown in a sense, you know. It's like a lot of people, I feel, they lost their purpose, which can lead into, you know, depression, mental health issues, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's actually a lot of parallels there, you know. But when I went to prison, yeah, you know, it's a very frustrating place to be. You don't know what's going to happen next in your life. You know, I had moments of absolute despair, where like the future was black. You know, not just bleak but black. You know, you just can't see into the future. You know, and it starts to get on top of you, big time. I still remember that day when they put you in that cell and they closed the door, you know, and you hear that cell door closing behind you. It's a weird feeling because, you know, many of us have been grounded when we were kids, you know, by your mum and dad or whatever, you know, and it's like, you can tend to think it might be a little bit like being grounded, but it's not. It's like a million times worse. You know that, like, man, I've just had my freedom taken away. You know, I can't go out. I can't do what I want. I'm basically at the mercy of someone else, you know?
Mate, it's crazy. I think so many people can resonate with that right now. Like I can. I feel I've definitely had days or weeks even where you're like, my purpose has been stripped away. Like, what does my life even look like now? How do I even make a living right now? You know, being a touring musician, not being able to tour is pretty problematic. So what was you said routine was like your best friend in prison. What was some like best practices? Like what did you notice? Like, clearly when I do this or when this happens or this was a turning point. What was some like really positive things that you picked up from being in lockdown? So,
you know, relating to other guys that were, you know, were there, you know, it's good to keep relationships going. You know, in many ways, thank God for Zoom and stuff like that, right? So you can keep in touch with people. But in prison, you know, relationships are important. Training, fitness, you know, keeping the exercise going. You know, I've always been into exercising. I kept that going when I was in there. Reading a good book. You know, you got to try and do all you can to stop yourself from sinking. You know, that sort of thing. Used to go out on the landing, of course, and play pool and table tennis and that, you know, just anything for a bit of interaction with the guys.
Yeah. Did you find a lot of guys would refrain from that and just stay in bed? Are you able to stay in bed all day or?
You know what, you could actually, but anyone that was doing that, you know, you knew that they were not in a good place, you know? So, you know, people would start reaching out to them for sure. Because you need to get out of your cell. If you know, if you're stuck in your cell, they're bad signs, you know. Even though sometimes we don't feel like connecting with people because we feel a bit down or whatever, actually relationships are so important. And you got to kind of be proactive and come out, you know, come out of your cell.
It's funny to think that. You know, I often, I'm sure most people that have never been to prison wonder, is it actually that bad? But I think just having your purpose stripped away is... That's the biggest thing.
It is it? That is what I would say actually led me into kind of having my, encounter, if I can say that, my encounter with God, if you like, because I literally felt like I was going into despair at one point. And, I felt really frustrated, like totally frustrated. It's actually quite difficult to explain it because, anybody, if you feel that, it's more of an experience than anything. You kind of feel it inside. And I felt like I was being tied up, and I couldn't break loose. And it was in that moment actually that I was almost forced into a corner to rethink a whole bunch of stuff. And that was in that moment that I really had a powerful moment with God.
It's incredible. It's what a place to find purpose, because ultimately then coming out of lockdown, that has been your entire purpose in life.
Yeah.
That faith and that relationship and becoming a pastor and caring for people, loving others. What a ridiculous transformation, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
Like, to go from, pushing drugs to pushing love is a crazy transformation that ultimately came out of a season of imprisonment and lockdown.
Exactly. And I think what happens, Nate, is that, when people are on lockdown, when people are in prison, you do reflect a lot. There's no question. And to be honest with you, I know like lockdown has been hard for a lot of people in many different ways. And you don't neglect that. Don't try to not see that. A lot of people have found it hard, but at the same time, I actually think that it can be a major benefit.
Yeah.
I actually think prison can be a benefit. I mean, that's partly why, people are there, is that you need to reflect. It's time to think about what you've done. And I think in lockdown, to be honest with you, I think a lot of people have reflected on the more important things of life, like family and more of a balanced lifestyle. I think particularly in the UK, actually, I personally feel that in the UK we're very driven, it's always looking to achieve the next thing. And life in the UK is pretty fast, compared to a lot of other countries. And I personally feel like we, you can't say this about everyone, of course, but a lot of people, I think, lost a balanced lifestyle, So being on lockdown is not altogether a bad thing. Actually, I think it's made a lot of us reflect on stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was telling you earlier that a friend of mine's in prison at the moment, and I write to him, and it's great to see that when he first went in, it was, this sucks, to actually, I've just picked up my English GCSE that I couldn't get. And then, and now I'm starting a course on psychology, and he was doing other things, and I'm like, so proud of him in a season that can ruin your life. Is actually being the catalyst of changing his life. And I hope that, and everybody in my kind of social circle, I'm trying to like implement that on their lives as well, that, hey, like, this absolutely sucks, but we can really reevaluate, recalibrate, and bring change in our lives. I've added some routines, that, like, some good habits, and cut out some bad habits, and it's a perfect opportunity to do that.
Absolutely.
It's just hard to see when you feel like all purpose has been stripped away. And
it's a time to sort of like dig in a sense, isn't it? You got to dig deep. And like I say, very often when you have to dig deep, you find some great pearls. That you kind of forgot about.
It's good. It's good. So when you were getting ready to be released back out into the big wide world, what was that like? Because I know that the young people that I work with, and they were afraid of going back to school last week. Like, there was some real fears about coming out of lockdown. Was it the same coming out of prison?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if I would, if I was afraid, but I was definitely, I felt very alert. like all my antennas, you know, were going, you know, so I was very alert, very cautious of what I was about to face. And in a sense, it's kind of, it's taking one day at a time and making good choices, you know, each day that you're going to manage your day well, you know, because I was actually, you know, I was you know, cautious of the fact that I would slip back into, you know, what I was like before. And I think what I needed to do is I needed to be very intentional of embracing a new life, you know, and thinking, actually, you know what, things can be good, and being intentional of making good choices every day to bring about that good, you know. I
you know,
would say, yeah, go on, mate. No, you go.
I was just going to say, one of the big things you hear from, like, when you watch the crime shows on BBC and stuff, you always hear them say, like, now don't fall back into the same crowd.
Exactly.
And so, and you know, you've got a crazy story when it comes to the same crowd, because the same crowd that you were hanging out with pre-prison all ended up in church. So that's
yeah, exactly, which was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, which is crazy.
I actually went away for 3 years. You know, when I got out of prison, I went to Bible college for 3 years. And that was partly to fulfill, like, you know, what I felt like I wanted to do in my life, you know, becoming a Christian leader and a pastor and stuff. But to be honest, it was also a way of getting away. I felt like I needed to get away. And then come back to the community stronger, you know. And the amazing thing was like you say, when I got back to the community, by then, because I'd obviously kept in touch with a lot of friends, you know, you don't just like disown your mates, but they were still up to the same stuff. I didn't want anything to do with it. But when I used to come home on weekends or summer holidays and stuff, you know, I'd still connect with them a little bit, see how they were doing. And I would tell them, you know, I'd tell them about my new life, you know, and they were super curious. And it gave me opportunity to tell my story to them, you know, what had happened to me in prison and stuff. Yeah. And then, like you say, like, I mean, literally dozens of my friends, you know, came into the church. Some of them now are actually pastors as well.
It's crazy. I'm sure there's some people listening that, well, I would say that it's better to have a Christian walk in the street than a drug dealer, but some people might disagree with me. I don't know, but I would definitely say it's better to have someone in church than dealing drugs,
yeah,
which is awesome. So that's like one of the things, like after lockdown, a counselor that I'm friends with said, hey, we need to be careful who we're spending time with, because if we've created these good habits, we don't want to fall back into bad habits. Even a famous YouTuber, Logan Paul, I was listening to his podcast and he was like, got invited to go to a nightclub that reopened. And I'm like, do you know what? Why would I want to go there until 4 a.m. not hearing anybody speak? Like, I feel like I've added value to my life and I don't want a nightclub to take away that value.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, if you want to do that, that's fine. But this was just his experience. So friendship, like not going into the same friendship circles, anything else that you noticed after lockdown was like good practice not to go back to?
Yeah, I think it's probably when I was in prison, I actually learned that sense of routine. And I think before I went to prison, probably I had no routine in my life. Now, if I was to use that as a parallel with lockdown, I would probably say that before lockdown, a lot of us maybe have lost a balanced lifestyle, you know, because it all becomes about work or whatever. And then in lockdown, you kind of think to yourself, actually, I've picked up a routine again. And I think that can become somebody's best friend almost, you know. That when you come out of lockdown, it's about routine. And, you know, keeping the higher ground in a sense with that, you know, it's like, so you keep routine. Actually, for me, when I got out of prison, it was going to get a job, you know, and I hadn't worked for a number of years. So going to get a job brought stability into my life. Going to the gym after work brought stability into my life. Spending more time with the family. you know, that sort of thing. So
That's a big one for you, isn't it? Because I remember in your book and hearing you tell your story many times that family was like a big thing for you pre-prison, right? And then it really like, am I right in saying it like broke was it your granddad's heart or?
Yeah. I had a great relationship with my grandfather. You know, I had a great relationship with my family, but I had a great relationship with my grandfather. He became almost like a dad in a sense, you know, in a father figure in my life.
Yeah.
And kind of adored him really. And, you know, I know for a fact that I broke his heart, you know, because of my lifestyle. And the funny thing is that when I got out of prison and got into a normal lifestyle, somebody told me that my grandfather had said, "Oh, now I can sleep at night in peace because I know Neil is okay." And I think very often we don't really realize how our lifestyle impacts, you know, the people that love us, you know.
Yeah.
And I was actually quite a selfish person, I would say, and not realizing it. Didn't you know, wasn't intentionally selfish, but I was probably quite immature. And in my immaturity, I became selfish, and I impacted a lot of people's lives negatively.
You know, I look at my own life and it's been firing at all cylinders throughout my 20s, touring and traveling for work, and see that selfish nature. And it's been awesome to pause and actually just think about, I really want to see my parents. Like, I really want to spend time with my family. And it's been great actually recalibrating there as well. And going for dinner and not just leaving straight after my mum's fed me, but actually spending time with the family. And
you know, I was listening to a guy speaking yesterday, and you know, he was referring, because you know, he's like a couple of decades older than us, and you know, he was saying that when he was younger, the big thing was about, you know, work ethic. And this is where they picked up this phrase, you know, workaholic, you know. So they, you know, they looked up to that a lot. They held it in high regard. But the problem is that, you know, it just brought too much pressure on families. And these days, it's not like that. People want a more balanced lifestyle, you know. And I would actually really encourage people, when, you know, when you get out of lockdown, to defend that, because that will try and be stolen from you. And you need to sort of like dig your heels in a little and say, no, I'm going to keep the balance, you know. I mean, any psychologist will tell you, and I actually work with a medical doctor. She used to be a medical doctor. You know, she's got a master's degree and, you know, studies on psychology and stuff like that. And she'll tell you, if you don't have a balanced lifestyle, you know, it can impact your mental health big time.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember someone telling me that your greatest success will only be as good as your success at home. And I was like, oh, and that was at a time when my home life was very, very tough. And I just remember thinking, what's it all worth then? Like, of course, I'm not being as successful as I want in my career if at home it's just crumbling, you know? So no, it's good advice. So just last quick question. What would you say to anyone coming out of prison or lockdown? What would be like, hey, if I can just give you one bit of advice, this is it?
Well, I think once again, it's taking a step back, you know, from the way that it's been, and making a very conscious choice of taking your life in a different direction. If you felt overwhelmed before lockdown, and you're kind of glad of this break, it's just giving you a bit of breathing space. You know, when you come out of lockdown, every day make some wise choices to keep a hold of that. And I believe what happens is that as we make more and more choices in that direction, you start to shape your life. It's very easy for society, our surroundings, even other people to shape our lives. And that's probably one of the things I would say more than anything. We're too quick to give over our lives, you know, and we need to keep a hold of it, and we need to treasure it, and we need to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, it'll be easily lost. And take one day at a time. You know, make good choices for today. You know, all the great leadership teachers in the world, you know, they will all tell you the same thing. You know, it's just make a good choice right now, and then make another good choice. You don't have to think about 5 years down the road. Make a good choice every day, you know, to take your life, and your life will go in a good direction.
It's good. It's good. Makes me think about that good, faithful scripture. Don't worry about tomorrow because it has enough worries of itself. Let's just continue being the best we can be in the here and now. So,
and you know, I think as well, Nath, one of the things that people probably need to be careful of is when we come out of lockdown, the danger is to go a bit wild. You know, it's you know, it's a little bit like if you've locked the dog up for a while, you know, when you let that dog out of the cage, you know, the dog can go wild, right? And I think to be honest with you, I think that could be a danger with us as well. That when we get out of lockdown, the temptation is that you go a bit wild. I mean, we've seen it on the news, right? I don't know if you saw the photographs of, like, you know, Bournemouth Beach a couple of weeks ago. It was like packed there, you know. Ogmore, I think Ogmore was the same in Wales.
Yeah, we had a scrap down there, didn't we? Classic Wales.
So, you know, the temptation is to go wild. But my encouragement would be to people is, like, you know, just use a bit of common sense, because, you know, a wild moment like that can once again then take your life in a different direction. Yeah. So it's actually, I would say, before all restrictions are lifted and we get back into normal life, I would encourage people to plan now. You know, actually plan it now. A lot of times we get into trouble, we go a bit crazy in our lives because we haven't planned well. You know, here's another good quote actually by, you know, a good leader. I heard once that if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. So it's about planning, and we've actually got an opportunity now in lockdown to plan, you know, to make a plan for our lives, and not just come out of lockdown and think, oh wow, I've been locked up for last 3 months, now I'm going to go a bit nuts, you know.
Yeah, one of the very first conversations that we did for this channel was Dan Blythe, the guy, spoke about like his 5 core principles in his life, and just maybe taking a moment to establish those core principles in your life and just build on those core principles. You know, am I going to do everything with humility? Am I going to do everything with integrity? If it doesn't line up to humility and integrity, don't do it. You know, stuff like that. It's good to just take a moment to go recalibrate. Who am I? What do I want to be? What do I want for my future? I think that's positive for everyone, man.
And it makes you feel good, doesn't it? You know, it makes you feel good that you've got a plan for your life, you know. Once again, you know, just to quote a verse in the Bible, you know, it says that without a vision, people perish. I think that's probably how I felt in prison. You know, when you don't have any purpose, you know, you start to get into despair. So without a vision, people perish. Or another way of saying it, another translation actually says this, that without a vision, people cast off restraint, meaning there's no accountability. They don't hold themselves accountable because they don't have a plan. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a vision for your life, you know, your life can go in any direction. That's what happened to me actually when I was young. That's how I ended up getting into a whole bunch of trouble, because I didn't have a plan. You know?
Yeah, it's good, mate. It's good. I really appreciate your time today, man. I think it's a timely conversation to be having as the restrictions are lifting and life is kind of looking a little bit normal. So yeah, I really appreciate it, man. It's been great connecting.
It's been great to see you again, mate.
Cool. Thanks, Neil.
Yeah, all the best, buddy.
I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. It never ceases to amaze me that so much good can come out of bad situations. For Neil, going to prison meant that he lost purpose in his life. But it was during his time in prison where he truly found himself. He was able to use a bad situation in prison to be the catalyst for change in his life. How are you using your season of lockdown and imprisonment to change your future? What are some best practices that you're going to implement when we come out of this season of lockdown? I think there's something poignant about surrounding ourselves with the right people that will encourage us to keep the good habits that we've started throughout this season. Lockdown has been such a crazy time for all of us, but I'm excited to see the good that can come from it. Let me know in the comment section the lessons that you've learned throughout lockdown, and have a great day.
Hi, you still watching? You must have something better to do by now. Seriously though, thanks so much for watching today's episode from Inc. Remember, we all have those days where you feel like you don't matter, everything's going wrong, and no one is there to listen or relate. But here at Inc., you do matter. Remember, here you're included in something. You're part of a community where you are included. We want to inspire your future and bring a little bit of hope to your day. And before we wrap up, please do subscribe and stay connected to Inc. so we can continue to give you content that delivers a little bit of hope. See ya.